It's the champ, Shannon the Cannon, two-time heavyweight champion of the world. And you're watching Sports Icons. Subscribe. Let's go, champ. Let's go, champ. Let's go, champ. Champ.
Now, for most people, coming into this fight between Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., Iron vs. Superman, this was going to be a case of Mike Tyson was going to come forward, trying to throw bombs. Roy Jones Jr. would be on the outside, dancing around, using his no-look jab, all that kind of stuff. And in reality, that's pretty much what this fight was. Now, it was an exhibition fight. I'm not an expert on the rules of exhibition, but to be honest with you, it just seemed like a regular fight. Now, a lot of people also thought that Mike Tyson, as soon as he caught up with Roy Jones, he would end him. Or Roy Jones would just dance his way to a points victory. But that wasn't the reality. The reality was that Mike Tyson seemed to be the one with the engine. Roy Jones Jr. was the one who was very defensive, that's for sure, but he seemed to be the one that was breathing heavy. Mike Tyson would just keep on coming forward, trying to throw the bombs, but whenever he got close, Roy Jones would tie him up. And that's pretty much how this fight turned out to be, was pretty much a hold fest. That's how it was, because Roy Jones Jr. just didn't want to fight, he wanted to hold him. Hey, it's fair play, both these guys are in their 50s. Roy Jones, he didn't want to get knocked out, okay, which is fair enough. But to be fair, Roy Jones did take some pretty good shots in this fight. I'm not going to say he didn't, he really did. But Mike Tyson was certainly going for the knockout. Now, as far as the holding is concerned, the referee did give Roy Jones Jr. numerous warnings, but didn't do anything about it. Now, these are 2-minute rounds. It was an 8-rounder, and it went the distance for 8 rounds. Now, the result of a draw, personally, I disagree with. Now, I know there's going to be some debate about that, because obviously a lot of people will just look at the fight for what it was, which is what I did. Or a lot of people will look at the fight saying, I really, really hope Mike Tyson wins because I was always I'm a huge fan of his. Or a lot of people say, well, I really hope that Roy Jones Jr. wins because I was a big fan of his. And I think maybe a lot of people are scoring the fight in that way. But in my opinion, Mike Tyson won this fight quite comfortably, to be honest with you. Because Roy Jones Jr., while he was showing some flashes of what he used to do, he was up on his toes, he was dancing around, he was showing some pretty good skill in flashes, in very, very small parts. Mike Tyson was doing what Mike Tyson does, hands up, bobbing and weaving, coming forward, trying to land a huge left hook, followed by the right. Now, he was certainly throwing the right hook, and a lot of them were getting through to the body and that, which is why I think maybe it was Roy Jones that was starting to get really tired, Mike Tyson not. Because Mike Tyson, as much as he was doing most of the work, shall we say, as in being the aggressor, he wasn't getting hit too much back. Roy Jones was. He was getting some body shots whipped in from Mike Tyson. Now, for me, I don't agree with the result, but I understand the result because the result, in my opinion, was always going to be a draw. If the fight went the distance, it wouldn't have mattered whether Mike Tyson got hit to the canvas several times but went the distance, or Roy Jones Jr. hit the canvas several times and went the distance. It was always going to be a draw, and I think that the unofficial judges, as they call them, was always going to score this fight as a draw because they're both legends of boxing. That's how they were going to do it. Did Mike Tyson know this before the fight? Did Roy Jones Jr. know this before the fight? I have no idea. But for me, I think that's why they done it as a draw. But if we're going to score this fight as a proper boxing match, albeit it was 2 minutes per round, for me, you have to go with Mike Tyson. Roy Jones Jr. didn't really win rounds because he was holding. Of course, that was restricting the work of Mike Tyson for sure. And a certain amount of holding is allowed, but excessive holding, not allowed. But again, there was a clash of heads at one point as well. And I thought, oh, here we go. The referee's going to stop the fight now. But no, he didn't. I think the referee done okay in this fight, to be fair. He did do okay. And it did make me laugh at times when the referee would warn Roy Jones to say, you're doing too much holding, man. And the Roy Jones would turn around and go, well, come on, man. I'm supposed to. I have to. This is Mike Tyson. So there were some comical moments in this fight. But it was an interesting one. For me, it turned out a little bit better than what I thought it was going to turn out. But Anyway, that is what it is. I am Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., Superman. It was an interesting fight. It was interesting. It wasn't the exciting fight. Had you have put these guys in their prime against each other, to be honest with you, I think that fight would have pretty much turned out how it did anyway, to be fair. Both of these guys were showing flashes of what made them great, but of course, Roy Jones Jr. was smothering the work of Iron Mike Tyson. Just wouldn't let him throw, just wouldn't let him fight. And to be honest, that's how you deal with Mike Tyson. So you can't really blame Roy Jones for those tactics, but hey, it is what it is. You drop your thoughts below about it, click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you all in the next video.